What if I told you Britain's empire was never built on conquest alone? What if it was built on whispers, ink, and the quiet calculations of men who learned to rule the world without ever leaving their rooms? In classrooms, we learn about explorers and red-coated soldiers, of gallant ships and heroic captains. But beneath that polished history lies a deeper machinery, a web of secrets. Trade and control so intricate, it changed the destiny of continents. It began not on battlefields, but in counting houses, where candlelight flickered across parchment maps and men drew invisible lines through lands they'd never seen. The British Empire was a creation of paper and profit long before it was one of power. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth I granted a charter to a group of London merchants. The East India Company was born not as an army, but as a corporation with the power of a nation. Through trade, it grew teeth. Through influence, it grew claws. While kings and queens wore crowns, these merchants wore ledgers. They didn't conquer with swords, but with signatures. Villages in Bengal and ports in Africa became pieces on a chessboard of commerce. As fortunes flowed into London, the crown quietly smiled. Coffee houses buzzed with gossip of exotic goods and distant wars, while behind closed doors, decisions were made that would starve one nation and enrich another. The empire's first secret was this: it never truly belonged to the people, it belonged to those who controlled the flow of gold. As decades passed, Britain learned the subtle art of domination. Rule without asterisk. Appearing asterisk to rule. The navy became its shadow, the pound sterling its silent weapon. In ports from Singapore to Sierra Leone, British ships unloaded more than cargo. They brought laws, languages, and invisible chains. A clerk's pen in Whitehall could decide the fate of 1 million farmers in India. A banker's whim in London could set the price of bread in Cairo. Yet, even as wealth poured homeward, the moral ledger grew darker. Whole populations were displaced for sugar, cotton, and tea. In the Caribbean heat, enslaved men carved profit into the soil under lashes that cracked like thunder. While in Britain, polite society sipped the sweetness of empire from porcelain cups. Children in factories spun cloth for markets across the globe, never knowing the hands that picked the cotton thousands of miles away. It was a circle of exploitation disguised as progress, and its brilliance lay in how ordinary it all looked. Empires built by armies fall when the soldiers leave. Empires built by habits, by systems, can endure for centuries. In the Age of Enlightenment, Britain mastered not only trade but narrative. It told stories of civilization, discovery, and divine destiny, weaving morality into imperialism, until conquest looked like compassion. Missionaries followed merchants, teaching obedience in the language of salvation. Maps filled with red, the empire's chosen color. Bold as blood, and each new colony was sold to the public as another triumph of order over chaos. But beneath the surface, fear held it all together. The crown's agents spied not only abroad but at home. Letters were opened, voices silenced, and dissent branded as treason. The empire was a theater of control, and every citizen, knowingly or not, played their part. Even the Great Industrial Revolution, which transformed Britain into a global powerhouse, ran on resources stripped from colonized lands: India and Coton African metals, Caribbean sugar. The factories in Manchester roared with the energy of stolen worlds, and yet few paused to ask the cost. For the people living under the Union Jack, the story was different. In Bengal, famine devoured millions, as grain was shipped overseas to keep British markets steady. In Kenya and Jamaica, revolts were met with a brutality hidden from British newspapers. Whole cultures were reshaped, languages erased, traditions outlawed, leaders executed or exiled. Still, the empire painted itself as benevolent. School books spoke of unity, never of suffering, of progress, never of pain. The second great secret of Britain's rise was silence, not the absence of sound, but the orchestration of forgetting. History was edited by those who wrote it, and those who bled for it were buried beneath polite pages. Even Winston Churchill, hero to some and villain to others, understood this balance of myth and truth. He once famously said, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." And he did. The empire's greatness became a story Britain told itself to stay asleep at night. Yet, behind every empire's facade lies its reckoning. The 20th century brought the whisper of rebellion, which soon turned to a roar. India, the jewel of the crown, shimmered with unrest. Peaceful protests were met with rifles, and voices for freedom were drowned at places like Jallianwala Bagh. Across Africa and the Middle East, colonies stirred, demanding the right to their own destinies. The world wars that drained Europe's lifeblood also drained its illusions. British soldiers fought fascism abroad while colonial subjects fought for recognition at home. When independence finally came, it wasn't gifted. It was taken. Flags changed. New anthems rose. But the empire's ghost refused to die. Its networks of trade, its language of diplomacy, its financial arteries all remained. The third secret of Britain's empire was its immortality. Though its map shrank, its influence seeped deeper into the systems of the modern world: banking, education, law, and culture. Quiet, unseen, yet omnipresent. Today, as you walk through London, the empire is still there. It hides in the marble of museums, where artifacts from across the world rest behind glass and silence. It whispers from street names, monuments, and royal processions, speaking a language older than truth. The wealth that built the empire's glory left its fingerprints on every corner of the city, from the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral to the corridors of the Bank of England. Even the time by which the world sets its clocks, Greenwich Mean Time, is a reminder of Britain's once absolute reach. And yet, for all its achievements, a question lingers that history cannot quite erase. What did it cost? For the millions who suffered, the families uprooted, the voices silenced, was the empire's greatness ever truly worth the price? Some historians argue that Britain brought progress: railways, education, governance. Others see those same railways as chains, those schools as instruments of obedience. Perhaps both are true, for empires are never pure in their legacy. They build and they destroy in equal measure. But the most remarkable truth is that Britain's empire still shapes us today in ways we barely perceive. From the English language's dominance to the global financial systems headquartered in London, from international law to cultural identities, architecture remains the skeleton of our modern age. The old empire didn't end. It evolved. It learned to exist without borders, to govern through influence rather than authority. The sun that never set on British power now glows through data cables, trade deals, and diplomatic ties that bind nations in unseen ways. So, as the fog rolls once more over the Thames, we must ask ourselves, when we speak of Britain's greatness, whose voices are we echoing? The merchants counting their gold, or the millions who paid the price for it? The empire was built in silence, but its echoes are everywhere, in every treaty, every museum hall, every word of English spoken across the planet. Perhaps the truest secret of all is that the empire never disappeared. It merely changed its face. And if it was built by shadows, maybe it still rules from them. So, tell me, if the empire never truly fell, then who really rules the world today? And would we even recognize them if we looked? Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into the hidden side of history as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. See you next time.